I'm Melissa Salrin, and I'm here with Rachael Woody. We're talking with Norm McKibben of Pepperbridge Winery at Pepperbridge on July 16th, 2014. So to start off, Norm, why wine?
Well, I was corporate, which was heavy construction, for 25 years, and I was on the road. I was covering the whole country as president of the non-union side of Peter Kiewit's Sons, and so I was on the road 5 days a week. We had a board meeting every Saturday, and the kids were growing up and leaving home, and they'd pay me too much. And so in 1985, I decided it was time to unwind and come back to the Northwest, because home office was Omaha for them. And I looked at La Jolla and Tucson, and my wife said, "You're going to Walla Walla." So we did. She was right. But I had no intention of getting in the wine business. The governor asked me if I'd chair state transportation, which is a volunteer job. I was chairing it when the I-90 bridge sank, which made me decide I don't want to do that anymore. But Mike Hogue came to me, and I'd known him before, and Mike said, while you were gone, I started a winery. I need help. Well, I joined him at 30,000 cases, and we took it to 500,000. And at that point, I decided it was profitable. It was a very good wine for the price, but I could have stayed with the entity I was with, and I enjoyed heavy construction, and this was just turning into more of a job like that instead of fun. So I decided I wanted to. Mike had talked me into planting vineyards in 1989 was my first vineyard, and that was on a ranch we owned outside of the Walla Walla Valley. I did not know the value of AVAs at that time, and I knew nothing about growing grapes. I decided anybody can grow grapes, which was one of my big mistakes in my life. And so I planted on the farm we owned, and 9 years later, incidentally, I tore that block out, and my wife said, "You had your $250,000 PhD in grape growing," and I did. I'd spent a lot of money getting that far.
That was in Waitsburg, right?
Yes, it was. Yeah, up Whiskey Creek.
Oh, okay.
But in the meantime, in 1991, I planted here. In 1989, I and several others planted on Canoe Ridge, and out of that, the Shalom Wine Group joined us, and I became chairman of the board of Canoe Ridge for a period of time. I stepped down, stayed on the board, but stepped down from chair when I started my own winery because I didn't want a conflict of interest. And so I decided in 1990, I have to stop and think, 1997 early, that I wanted my own winery. And by then I had Pepperbridge and Seven Hills were producing, and I called on Tom Eddy, who was the last winemaker at Christian Brothers before it was taken over back years ago. And I'd known Tom. I used to spend a fair amount of time in Napa before I was even in the wine business, because I like the taste of wine. And so I called on him and used him as a consultant, and literally between us, we designed the flow on this winery. We called an architect in to put it together, but I stole all my ideas. This winery is very modern, very up to date, but I stole the ideas from all over the country on it. So I don't know, I rambled there on your question.
No, that's great. You're anticipating everything. So Virginia, was she from the area?
Virginia is from Pomeroy, which is about 60 miles from here, but I met her here in Walla Walla.
Oh, okay.
My first wife died very young,
okay.
And I had 3 children, and Jenny had 2, so we merged families.
Wonderful. Okay.
There's no Brady Bunch either.
Okay. Who were some of the other early winemakers, wine growers that you worked with?
Well, when I came back here in '85, there was Leonetti, they called 41, and that was Baker Ferguson at that time, and who also was a good friend. And Rick Small, so I'm blanking there for a second. Actually, Mike Paul was here also. Mike died some years ago, but about that same time, Waterbrook started, and I saw them bring their first label in, so I know I was here before they bottled, because I looked at their first label. No, they were showing it to me. Yeah, but that was the group. And as I remember, about 5 years later, by 1990, we doubled in size. There were 10 of us, and we thought we were really going great gun. But I think Canoe Ridge was number 8, if I remember right, and this was number 18. And at that time, we were the only winery south of town. We decided we're going to make a wine. This is naivety. So, but at the time, we said we're going to make a wine so that people will come to us. I shudder now every time I hear that from somebody.
Well, I know Marty was telling us about of Lake Cole about trying to purchase grapes from you after you had planted, and
he saw me picking some 2-year-old grapes off the vines because they slow down the growth on the vines, and nobody wants 2-year-old grapes. Well, Marty did. So he said, "What are you going to do with those?" I said, "I'm dropping them on the ground." I said, "Can I have them?" Until he made a little bit of wine out of 2-year-old grapes. He liked it. And the next year, Baker Ferguson and he caught me, and they said, "You know, if you would guarantee grapes every year from Pepper Bridge, we'll vineyard designate it," which was a big thing because my first vineyard, which is right here behind us, when I planted it in 1999, there were 40 acres in the whole valley, and they were scattered around through the valley. And that first block of 10 acres was 5 Merlot, 5 Cab, and it went in equal parts to Leonetti, to Woodward Canyon, Lake Cole 41, and Andrew Will. So I picked, without even knowing it, I picked kind of the creme de creme of the day. And people tasted their wines and wanted grapes, and I kept planting, and all of a sudden, all the assets I'd retired with, I spread out into other things. I could tell you too, they've all migrated back into one central area. Yeah.
Well, so do you think your background as a civil engineer has impacted?
I'm a civil out of Oregon State. I'm really a manager. Yes, I'm a registered engineer, but I spent all my time in management.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know that you were involved in, I know the AVA was established in 1984.
Yes.
And then you were involved in 2001 when it was extended.
Chris Figgins and I actually ran the line that set the new, yeah.
Okay, and so can you tell us about why you decided at that moment to do that?
Yeah, it's on tape, and it's too late for him to do anything, so I can tell you. But what happened was in '84, when they applied for it, they asked for a big area, and the feds looked at it and said, "You only have 4 wineries, you can't justify that." So they gerrymandered it around so it caught each of the 4 wineries, and it just snaked around through the valley. It made no sense. And in the meantime, I think Pepper Bridge was in it, if I remember right, at the time, barely. But we had some other vineyards and wineries coming on that weren't in it. And so I think if I remember right, there were about 6 or 7 wineries when we decided we were going to do something different, and about that number of vineyards. And at that time, we all packed a picnic lunch once a year and went and looked at each vineyard, toured together. And so somebody brought this idea up, and I said I'd be happy to help run with it. And Chris volunteered too, but we had 100% of the valley signed on, and it still took a couple of years on a lot of phone calls. But we got right down to the final point. I got to know the lady in Washington, D.C. that was handling it extremely well. She was trying to help us. And she called and she said, "We have a real problem. I just realized that one spot out of Dixie that you've claimed is outside of the Columbia River appellation, and you are a sub-appellation. You can't be outside the parent." And I said, "Well, there's a vineyard there. No, and the guys are starting a winery. We've got to have it in." And he said, "Oh, well, nobody will ever notice." And she changed the boundaries of the Columbia County, or Columbia Valley appellation.
Oh. Was that Biscuit Ridge? Or?
Yes, it was Biscuit Ridge. It was outside. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's great. I know that now we have the Walla Walla Valley Wine Alliance,
yes.
And the precursor to that was the Walla Walla Valley Wine Growers Association. So can you tell us about those organizations and what kind of role they have played?
Well, I and a lot of others helped found the alliance, but I don't remember a Wine Growers Association. Maybe I must have been in it without knowing. I think that's probably the group that went around and.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It was never very formal. You can tell that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the sense we've gotten from other people too.
Yeah.
People just getting together.
It was friendly. I mean, and still are. All of them I know, and I have to admit, I chaired the State Wine Commission for 4 years, and I said, I think there was 170 wineries when I came on, and I said I'm going to meet everybody. And it took me 2 years to go all the way around the state, I never met everybody because they were starting behind me faster than I could go around. And finally, after 4 years, I gave up on that effort. But the same here in town. At that time, I still knew everybody very well. And now I truly have quite a few, and I'm ashamed of that, but I just don't have time to get out and meet everybody. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so you were chair of the Washington Wine Commission, and you were also a member of the Oregon Wine Board.
Yes, I'm a founding member of the current Oregon Wine Board.
Okay, great, great.
The governor asked me if I would go on, and you don't really turn a governor down. David Adelsheim had been torquing on me, and I said, okay. He said, you have a 6-year appointment. I said, you have 1 year's notice. And that's the way I did. I went on a year to try and give him my thoughts. Yeah. Wonderful. I didn't have a lot to do with founding it, honestly. I give a lot of opinions.
That's good. Yeah. Well, I know. So in 1995, there were 11 wineries in the valley, and then by this year, depending on how you count, around 120 wineries, about 1,600 acres of grapes.
Yeah, I just saw a list of the bonds, and the bonds don't necessarily mean wineries, but they're bonded to make, and it was very close to 140.
Okay.
But I think there's about 100 wineries open for business, and the rest of the group, however many there are making wine, but it hasn't aged enough to come to market, so it's actually growing that fast, which is scary. I'm not scared of competition. It's just hard to comprehend after, for years, because I had come off the wine commission. The press would ask me, what do you predict in Walla Walla for the next 5 years? And every year we'd make it in 2 years.
Wow.
And when the recession started, they said, what's going to happen? And there I bit my lip and said, I think we'll weather it okay. Well, we weathered it literally without, we lost a couple that just gave up. They didn't bankrupt. And we came through it actually growing. So,
wow.
Yeah, which I would never have predicted. Yeah.
I know that you are on the advisory committee for the Center for Enology and Viticulture at the community college and college cellars. And I was hoping you could speak a little bit about how having that center here has changed things for the Valley.
But it had a lot to do with the number of wineries, because a lot of students come through there that decide they're going to stay here and make wine, or go to work for somebody to get a little more experience and then stay in the Valley to make wine. I'd say the current professors there are very good. We've had real good and like this, but the current are very good. And I see the people hiring, students coming out now. I think a rising tide lifts all ships, and so I hate to see somebody come out without previous experience, except a couple of years in school, and then jump right in and try to market wine. So I really encourage anybody that wants to hire them and give them a chance to learn what they're doing, because we cannot compete with Gallo up here. We're lucky to get high quality on 3.5 tons to the acre, 3.5 to 4 if you want to push it. Gallo can do 13 ton plus down, and we're not going to compete with Chateau Ste. Michelle, and I don't count that. I mean, Chateau Ste. Michelle has been a real boon to the Valley, or to the whole state, so don't get me wrong, but we can't produce like Hogue did and they did and compete that way, so we've got to have a niche, and it's got to be quality. And we have a big advantage. I'm jumping on you here.
No, this is great.
We have a big advantage over Napa in that they're paying $250,000 to $300,000 an acre for their ground. We're paying $20,000 for the same quality ground, and they've got the price to get that return on that. We have a big disadvantage in that they're well known, but the Walla Walla Valley has really gained in the last few years. I go to France about 1 year in 3, and Jean-Francois, being from Switzerland, right on the border, of course French is his native tongue. My wife speaks French. I don't. So, but the first years I went, I would say, "Have you ever tried Walla Walla wines?" Nope. Washington, nope. And now people shake my hand, say, "How are you, Norm?" So, I mean, not everybody by a long shot, but and most of that isn't that my name is familiar or famous. They're seeing quality wine come out, and any winemaker pays attention to a region that's making quality.
Great. Well, I know that you, along with Rick Small of Woodward Canyon, were one of the leaders in establishing a sort of sustainability support group and thinking about sustainable viticulture. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Actually, John Francois should get the credit for the idea. The IOBC, which is the agency that checks us, is based in Switzerland, and he's from there. But he's such a believer in it here that we separate corks and foil and paper and bottles, you name it, and there is no pickup here, for separate. So we truck it to the different places that take it. Yeah, we've been doing that for a long time. Our water here gets circulated out into a pond behind. It's cleaned by a big aerator, goes back to the vineyard, never leaves the site. But we use it, we wash down, it goes out, gets cleaned, and just comes back around. So and Rick is the other one that stepped up and was very interested in that. I financed the first 2 years, betting that it would go, and it did.
And so now we have...
And they've paid me back too, so yeah.
Wonderful. And so now we have the Walla Walla Valley Wine Growers Sustainable Trust.
Yes.
So that was established in 2004.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Okay.
John Francois was the head of it for first years, and Rick's been since. So yeah.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the Sylvain partnership?
Sure. It's obviously it's like Hole 41 and Leonetti Cellars and Pepper Bridge, if you will. I have different partners in every entity I'm in, and my family is in almost every one of them. In fact, the family now legally owns Amavi. All I do is finance. Okay. So, but the basic of the three wineries, a partner, Bob Rupar, who is a executive VP at Nelson Irrigation, and I started buying ag ground as soon as I retired, and we luckily, because I'm not sure I was smart enough to know the difference at the time, we were buying always irrigated ground. Okay. Now irrigation is very much a key to whether you can grow grapes in the area. But so Bob Rupar also was a partner in this, and when we started, I bought the old original block of Seven Hills, which was 24 of the original 40 acres in the valley in 1994 from Doctors Hendricks and McClellan. Mm-hmm. And a very foolish move on both our parts. We agreed that rather than change any names, that I would call that original old block Seven Hills Vineyard. They would call the winery Seven Hills Winery. We've got mixed up with each other ever since. And there's no way now that both names are known to a point you can't make a change.
Right.
Can't afford to make a change. And I got it because I was farming 100 acres of apples and grapes right beside it, and Dr. Hendricks actually owned the ground. Dr. McCullum was a partner with him in the vineyard, and Dr. Hendricks shared an airplane with me, so we were pretty close. And he said that he really wanted or needed, however you want to put it, to sell some of that ground, but he did not want to kick his son Scott out of his house, and that's 160 acre zoning. And so the way he could get around that, and the only way, was to do a boundary line adjustment with me. So you can move a small parcel into another parcel as long as both of them stay over 160. And so I said, that's fine with me, you set the price. So there's never any arguing. He set the price, I paid it, and we moved in. Well, in 96, we saw 21 below zero for 3 days, and my investment didn't look too good. We did, however, get about 20 pounds of grapes from the ends of some of the vines that were under the snow, and didn't kill, which is amazing because I thought everything was coming down. And if you look out in front of the tasting room door as you go out at the Bronx, that is one of the actual vines. I mean, the model was one of the actual vines, and you'll see a big split down the side because it was 21 below at night, but in the daytime temperature had come up 50 degrees. The sun was shining and there was snow, and it was reflecting like a reflector like you used to get a suntan. But so the sap came up, and then it would be a 50-degree instant drop, and it just split things open.
Wow.
And it was still living, but it only, in a diameter about that much, it probably has that much good wood in it. No, but it was enough that it was still doing grapes. So wow. Then the piece of ground that is the current large Seven Hills vineyard came up in bankruptcy, and I made a deal to buy it off the bank. And about that time, Marty Clubb came to me and said he'd like to be a partner. He was buying grapes from me. Gary Figgins was buying grapes from the old block. He came and said he'd like to be a partner. And Bob Rupert said sure. And so we opened that vineyard and planted most of it in 97, 98, 99. And then a few years back, the LDS church owned the ground above us, actually surrounded us, but the bad part, they were uphill from us, and when their farmer made any mistakes with pesticides or herbicides, they drifted down on us. And so I had tried for quite a few years to buy that piece of ground above us. And I had an office in Salt Lake City, so I'd worked with the church quite a bit. And I knew that this was a welfare farm, so they changed managers every 2 years.
Okay.
And so every 2 years I went to the new manager and asked if I could buy the farm. And they said, what are you going to do with it? I said, wine grapes. And there's no way. No, we're not going to allow wine grapes. And so I finally found a manager that did not want to be living up here. And he said, well, make an offer. And I said, I just want that 100 acres. He says, all or none, which was, I forget the amount, but roughly 2,000 acres. And I said, it'll be cash. He said, I know we can do business. And so I called the partners and said, I did something really dumb. Would you like to join me? And everyone said yes without asking me what I'd done. So that's how Sylvain came about.
Wow.
I was quite sure they were going to join me, but yeah. But they had a choice.
Okay.
And then we put a lot of money, like $12 million, into developing roads and wells and what have you. And a longtime friend was president of the Westchester Group out of Champaign, Illinois, and they are the largest entity in the U.S. that handles retirement funds and puts them into ag ground. So if a big entity wants to have a certain percent of their assets in ag ground, they would call the Westchester Group and say, we want to put in $100 million, will you buy land for us? And then they manage the land. And Randall Pope, who was their president, came to me, and he bought a couple pieces from me in the past. And he actually had bought all of the land that is south of us right here, that has the orchard on it and kind of part of the vineyard, because again, it's 160 acre zoning. And I gave him a tour over the place, and he looked at it and he said, well, how can I get in on this? And so the Westchester Group is now a partner, and they have a few hundred billion in assets. So that it makes a good, solid partnership up there. And we'd sold roughly half the property before the recession, and we just quit trying to sell during the recession because we had no interest in dropping prices. We had too much invested. And we finally went back on the market a year ago. We have one sale that I don't really want to name until he finishes up one of the best known wineries in the state. And it's now, I think we're probably back on the market looking to move the rest. And Marty Clubb did not hurt us a bit with his award in the, because that is a vineyard on the Sylvain group. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I think I'm going to pass it over to Rachael at this point. So,
Already answered your questions.
I got a couple more, but you're doing really good.
Yeah.
All right, so now that we've covered your story and some of the origin stories, I want to ask you a little bit about the broader region and about Oregon and Washington, and then we have a couple closing questions that are usually fan favorites.
Okay.
So the first question I have for you is, Walla Walla Valley, what is this region known for? What is its identity?
You know, it's known for quality wine. I mean, I give Gary Figgins and Rick Small 99% of the credit for that, because they opted to start high quality, and as others came in, they stayed up. We have one or two now that are opting for volume versus quality, and that's what we did at Hogue. It was very profitable, but basically the valley has grown based on quality, and that's really what's had it known. I mean, everybody knows who Gallo is, but nobody's. I'll get shot here. Be careful. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, quite all right. Just let us know if we need to like censor that out of the video.
I'm dumb enough to say that you can keep it.
Okay. Would you like to continue, or you want me to jump in?
Ask me what the question was again.
What is the region known for? What is its identity?
It is known for quality, and it's also known by the people that visit it, because the wineries are a whole lot of small wineries, and they usually run into a winemaker or owner, as they go around. This morning they were just telling me they've had New York and Washington D.C. visitors both in, and that's not untypical at all. No, our list, it would be an unusual summer day that we didn't have 2 or 3 from way outside the area. But I hear all the time now, we always went to Napa, and if you visited there, if you come out of a winery, you can't make a left turn onto Highway 29. It's just too busy. You got to go with the traffic and find a place to turn around, and that's disillusioning people. I wish I had a tasting room in Napa, because you can't keep them away from your door. But I think that's the short. I think it is. I think it's quality and availability of the people in it. Well, I'll back up one more. If you drive here, which I know you have, from Seattle over the pass and then across the high desert country, Walla Walla all of a sudden looks very pretty. I mean, you see trees and stuff again. And the people from the west side, I've grown used to the east side, but people from the west side, they really notice that lack of trees, and all of a sudden it's a pretty spot. And it's the oldest town maybe in the Northwest. I know 1890 census had us at like 3,600 people, in Seattle 3,400. And the territorial governor was here. So it's got a history, and that fascinates a lot. Well, Whitman College has been there for 110 now, or
1883.
Okay.
Right, so.
Yeah.
And the seminary was there before.
No, it's good history.
Yeah. So I think that would summarize why I think it's become well known.
What have been some of the strengths and challenges of having a cross-state AVA?
None, truly.
No challenges?
No, there truly aren't. You could say it's a challenge that really never bothers us, but of course, if you move a crew member back and forth, he's got an extra tax return to file. I have a tax return to file because I'm an extra one, because I'm in both states. But no, we totally ignore the state line. And in about 2 weeks, the Oregon Wine Board is coming up, and they're going to meet in Milton Freewater, and they've extended invitations to all the people up here to come down and drink wine with them and get to know all of them. So, and I have always pitched, when I was on the Washington Wine Commission, the Oregon Wine Board, we should be marketing as Northwest.
Yeah.
Because I ask people all the time, who's closest to Canada, New Jersey or Delaware, and very few people, they guess, but very few people know. Back there, and I do a lot of time on the East Coast back there, it's the same thing between Washington and Oregon. They know we're out west, but they don't really know. My brother-in-law was in the hospital for quite a while, and I was visiting him and got to know the doctor, saying hello to him. And I said, I'm heading home. And he says, yeah, you live out west, don't you? I said, yeah. He says, that's Chicago. So, but to them back there, we're clean water, clean air. We have wild Indians yet. I mean, there's no question in their minds on that. But we are an entity as Northwest, and not as Oregon or Washington. So I'm on my lobbying horse here, but
no, please continue on the lobbying horse. That's kind of what I'm interested in, especially as the Oregon representative of Melissa and I's partnership. Is what is that relationship like?
Well, we have virtually no competition between the two of us. I mean, grant you Medford area, Ashland has some very good Bordeaux wines, but the bulk of Oregon, and Oregon is known for Pinot Noir. My first vineyard, incidentally, was Chardonnay and Pinot, and it was clones out of Dijon. And when I tore it out, I realized that we can grow some pretty decent Pinot, but you can't sell Pinot from Oregon. I mean, from Washington, because that's an Oregon one. And I have people talking to me every once in a while, can I grow Pinot Gris? And the same thing. they envision this hot country, which it is, so I should be able to get real high tonnage, which I might be able to. I don't have any interest in growing high tonnage, so I don't think that helps the reputation at all. So, but that's probably my pitch there.
Excellent, I like it. So we talked about Oregon and Washington and the AVAs. I'd like to get your thoughts on, how we talked about how much it's grown since when you started to now. Where do you see it going? A projection, if you will.
I don't see it stopping. I tell people that ask that I think if you come on right now, in another 20 years, you're going to be one of the early people.
Yeah.
Not one of the pioneers. Gary Figgin's explanation of a pioneer is somebody that has arrows in his back. He's out front. But you're going to be recognized as one of the early ones. And we're about the stage right now that Napa was in about 1970. In 1961, I was working on the Transbay Tube. It's my first job out of school with Kiewitz. And I used to go up to Napa and I found 6 wineries. And I was talking to the winemakers at those 6, and they're all named wineries. And then I didn't get back there; I couldn't afford to, and they had me working. Family was growing, but when the Chalone group joined with us on Canoe Ridge, I started going down on a regular basis. And in the early to mid '70s, it was just very comfortable there, like it is here. You weren't crowded. I don't think we're going to get there, and I used to see signs on the bumper stickers, "Let's not be another Napa," but they have San Francisco, Oakland, Sacramento. All you can drive to Napa from any of those for lunch if you want to, and Portland and Seattle, you're going to spend at least 2 nights. You're going to come over here and spend a night, do some touring, and spend another night. So I don't know what the limit is in town or what it can hold. I think we're getting big enough that we're going to get a lot of help from the planning people, because they have to step in anytime they see something going on and the restrictions start coming. And you've seen it in the valley where I left.
Yes.
Yeah. And we had to fight it. We had the wheat people saying they did not want us to develop Sylvain because it was going to take ground out of wheat if we split up the acreage. They couldn't afford. And I don't argue that with them. I don't think it'll go back into wheat. As a matter of fact, they were paying us not to grow wheat on it when we split it up. It was in fallow ground. But I don't think wheat's necessarily the best use for it either. I mean, Marty pretty well proved that with what he made there. So, but I don't know how far it can grow. I have high hopes that somehow Milton Freewater can get on board with it. They are getting enough wineries now that people will drive down. With 1 or 2 wineries, you had no hope people came to taste wine. They were going to spend an extra hour going each way. No, but if they can go down there for a day, there's some pretty brave souls down there trying to make a living with their winery right now. But most of them have tasting rooms up here. Yeah, but I think it will grow into that area as far as the wineries. Walla Walla's got a big head start on motels and restaurants and so on. I don't know if that will ever spread down that far, but I would not be surprised to see a couple hundred wineries in this area. I think it's going to start getting crowded somewhere in there.
Right.
And it's as long as we're trying to make high-end wines, it'll work, but pretty quick. The biggest thing is going to become how happy you make the people in the tasting room when they come in. You're selling pleasure. When you get 50, and there are easily that many very high-end wines in the valley, you have trouble remembering where you visited even. And if you had a real good time, you remember that. So I think it's gonna, you've got to have the wine, but I think it's going to shift to pleasure. It's about as much prediction as I can give you.
That was pretty thorough, actually. Thank you. With all of the experience that you've accumulated, what would your advice be to a new winemaker coming on the scene, or what was some of your lessons learned from this?
You've got to have financing. If you're coming on, well, I lay it on. Here's my advice to people coming in. I talk to a dozen or so a year now that are serious. One, either go to work for another winery, or go through school, preferably a 4-year course. But none of these people coming in they just aren't going to go to a 4-year course. And if you can't do all that, and if you don't have a very good palate, hire a good winemaker. And I'm serious on that too. But recognize that if you're going to try to have your own vineyard and your own winery, you better have quite a bit of money, because most people would prefer to get their money recovered on investment in 7 to 8 years, and you're going to be 12 to 15 years if you have good luck on. Just don't come into it thinking it's a way to get wealthy, and don't come to me with a business plan to review. Like, I don't see too many anymore. I used to see a lot that I call the Leonetti plan. We're going to make a wine so good we won't have to market. People will come to our door. Marketing is what determines whether your wine is successful or not. You have to have good wine to market, but marketing determines whether it's successful or not.
Right.
And it's not easy, especially if you're an introvert. It's not. I'm not an introvert, but especially if you are, it's not easy.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, between Melissa and myself, is there anything that we should have asked that we didn't, or any parting thoughts from you?
No, I can't think of anything right quick.
Okay, that's all right.
I'm not reluctant to say it if I can, but I can't think of anything.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Well, you're very welcome. Yeah.